A 7-year-old girl wandering alone through the desert stumbles upon a kidnapped billionaire who's been left behind. Though wary at first, the girl decides to help the man. She doesn't realize that this simple act of kindness will end up changing her life forever. The desert sun didn't forgive anyone, and around midday, even breathing seemed painful. Ellie walked barefoot over the cracked earth, her feet toughened by years without shoes, and her skin deeply browned by the relentless Sonoran sun. She was only 7, but her eyes held the weight of someone much older. Each day was the same routine, searching for food scraps, avoiding people who wanted to send her to shelters, and finding a safe spot to sleep where no one would notice her. That afternoon, as usual, she emerged from the bushes near the highway, looking for leftovers or an empty bottle she could trade for a few coins. She wasn't expecting to find anyone, least of all someone like him. At first glance, she thought he was dead. The man was motionless, tied tightly with thick rope to a twisted tree. His beard was thick, his suit dirty, lips cracked, and shirt soaked in sweat. When he suddenly moved, Ellie jumped back in alarm. "Please," he croaked with a rough voice. "Water." She watched cautiously from a distance, instincts telling her to stay away. If he's tied up, there's probably a good reason, she thought. But there was something about his weak voice and how he struggled just to lift his head that tugged at her heart. Taking a cautious step closer, she asked, "Who are you?" "My name is Harrison. Harrison Ford," he muttered weakly. "I was kidnapped." The name meant nothing to her. Ellie knew nothing about companies or wealthy businessmen. She only saw a wounded man desperately asking for water. "And why did they leave you here?" "They thought someone would come looking for me, but nobody has shown up." Ellie squinted into the harsh sunlight. She knew how cruel the desert could be. This man wouldn't last another day out here. Still, she wondered, if I help him, could I get into trouble? But then she shrugged. No one looked after her. No one cared whether she lived or died. Why shouldn't she help someone else? "I'll get you some water, but stay right there. If you try anything funny, I'll leave you here." Harrison nodded gratefully, watching as she disappeared into the bushes. Harrison Ford had never imagined he would end up begging for help from a street child. He was used to air-conditioned offices, expensive suits, and meetings with powerful investors, not this harsh, empty wilderness. His last clear memory was being shoved into a van outside his office in Tucson. After that, there had been darkness, beatings, and finally, abandonment in the scorching desert. He had expected quick rescue. After all, he was Harrison Ford, the powerful owner of one of northern Mexico's largest mining companies. But days passed, and nobody appeared. No phone, no food, no water. Only dirt, hot wind, and insects. When he first saw the girl, he thought she was a hallucination. But she was very real, and now she was his only hope. Ellie returned an hour later with a dirty bottle full of lukewarm water. He drank it greedily, as if it were the most precious liquid on earth. She watched him quietly from a distance, arms folded across her chest. "Why are you dressed like that?" she asked. I worked in an office." "And why did they kidnap you?" Harrison hesitated. How could he explain something as ugly as corruption, betrayal, and rivalry to a child? He simply said, "There are people who want what I have." She didn't fully understand, but she knew rich people often had enemies, sometimes even their own families. "You want me to untie you?" "If you can, please, but be careful, it's very tight." She hesitated, then reached into her worn backpack, pulling out a small knife with a red plastic handle. "This works better than scissors," she said, smiling mischievously. Harrison's eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "Some guys gave it to me. They taught me how to cut purses without anyone noticing. But I didn't like doing it, so I kept it for emergencies, like today." He swallowed hard. She wasn't just a dirty desert girl. She was a survivor. Ellie cautiously moved forward, knelt in front of him, and began cutting through the ropes with steady, precise movements. Harrison couldn't take his eyes off her. For the first time in his life, someone entirely outside his world was saving him, and for the first time, he felt completely vulnerable. When the ropes finally fell away, Harrison rubbed his wrists to restore circulation, grimacing at the deep, purple marks left behind. Ellie sat down several feet away, legs crossed, still watching him carefully as if unsure whether he was trustworthy. "Thank you," he rasped sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You would have died," she said bluntly. "Nobody lasts long out here without water. Not you, not anyone." A gust of wind kicked up sand, forcing them both to shield their eyes. The sun was lower now, and the shadow of the mesquite tree began to stretch across the dry ground. An uncomfortable silence settled between them, broken only by Harrison trying to clear his head, still struggling to comprehend everything that had happened. Ellie, on the other hand, seemed completely used to this harsh life. "Do you have a safe place to stay tonight?" Harrison suddenly asked. "I've got a spot, but it's mine, not yours," she replied suspiciously. "I wasn't trying to take it. It's dangerous out here." Ellie laughed dryly. "And being tied up like a donkey was safe for you?" Harrison didn't respond. Inside, he felt shaken. How could a kid sound so tough, so sure of herself? What kind of life made her this way at just 7? "Do you have family?" he asked softly. She shrugged, looking down. "Doesn't matter." "It does matter," he insisted gently. "Not to you," she snapped, jumping up quickly. "Listen, I helped you already. I don't owe you anything. Go handle your rich guy problems somewhere else." Harrison tried to stand, but his legs were still shaky. He leaned against the tree, unsteady. Ellie watched him, sighed impatiently, and finally said, "You won't even make it to the highway like that. There's an abandoned truck nearby. Sometimes I sleep there when I don't want anyone to find me. You can rest there if you don't die on the way." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away barefoot, leaving small footprints on the dry ground. Harrison hesitated for a moment, then slowly followed her. They reached an old, rusted truck hidden behind some bushes. Its doors hung loose, and it smelled of oil and damp earth inside. Ellie climbed inside effortlessly, as if it were her own home. Harrison struggled to follow, twisting an ankle as he climbed up. "Watch it, big guy," she called, laughing for the first time. They sat together on the metal floor. Ellie pulled a crumpled plastic bag from her backpack. Inside was a bruised apple, a piece of stale tortilla, and a jar filled with what looked like watered-down juice. "You're actually going to share that?" Harrison asked in surprise. "Today's your lucky day, but don't push it," she replied, handing him half of the apple. They ate quietly as sunlight filtered through cracks in the truck, casting shadows on their faces. She studied him curiously. "What did you do before they tied you to the tree?" "Business," he said vaguely. "I own a company." "What does it do?" "Mining. We dig up copper, silver, stuff like that." She made a face. "So you make holes in the ground, like dogs?" Harrison laughed, genuinely amused for the first time in days. "I never thought of it that way." Ellie managed a slight smile, then leaned her head back against the truck's metal wall, eyes closed. "Sleep," she whispered. "We'll have to walk tomorrow, but if you snore, you're out." Harrison watched her quietly, amazed at how someone so young could seem so strong, yet also carry such hidden sadness. He lay beside her silently as darkness settled over the desert. The first rays of sunlight slipped through a crack in the truck, landing on Ellie's sleeping face. Harrison was already awake, his back sore from the cold, hard floor. He hadn't really slept. Too many thoughts crowded his mind. His company, the kidnapping, Rodrigo, and this little girl. He observed her quietly. Her hair was messy, her face marked by tiny scratches, her lips cracked. She slept with one hand clutching her backpack, guarding it like a treasure. She was just a child, but she acted like someone who had already seen too much. With difficulty, Harrison sat up and opened the truck's door, allowing fresh morning air to flow inside. The desert felt peaceful, almost beautiful at this hour, but he knew this calm wouldn't last long. "What are you doing?" Ellie murmured sleepily. "I need to think. I have to get out of here." She rubbed her eyes and sat up slowly. "Where exactly are you gonna go? Do you even know where we are?" Harrison stayed quiet. He didn't know. He'd been unconscious most of the time after the kidnapping. He only knew vaguely that they were somewhere north, near the border. He scanned the horizon, looking for signs, roads, power lines, anything. "Maybe if we head east, we'll find something," he said, trying to sound confident. Ellie snorted. "Maybe? Do you know how many times I've walked east and found nothing?" Harrison was about to respond, but something in her eyes stopped him. Instead of arguing, he lowered his head. "You're right. I need your help." Ellie stared at him, surprised. She wasn't used to hearing those words, especially from someone like him. "Fine," she said after a moment. "But we walk in the morning, rest at noon, and always look for shade, or you'll pass out." "Got it, boss," Harrison replied, smiling. They walked for nearly 2 hours. Harrison quietly winced with each rock and twig that poked through his ruined, expensive shoes. Ellie, meanwhile, moved effortlessly, as if she'd memorized every inch of the terrain. "Did you ever have a home?" Harrison asked, trying to break the awkward silence. "I did," she replied. "But being there was worse than living out here." "And your parents?" "I don't want to talk about it." Harrison realized he had touched a nerve and stopped pressing her. Instead, his mind drifted to Rodrigo, his son. Where was he now? Did he know what had happened? Could he be involved? Just the thought was enough to haunt him. Suddenly, Ellie stopped and raised her hand. "Shh! Did you hear that?" Harrison listened closely. From a distance, the faint hum of a vehicle approached. Quickly, they ducked down behind a small slope, hiding among some bushes. Ellie watched carefully, holding her breath. A white pickup drove slowly along the dirt road. 2 men sat up front. She recognized one of them. "Those are the guys who tied you up," she whispered. "If they spot you, they'll take you again." A chill shot down Harrison's spine, his heart pounding heavily. Only after the truck's engine faded away did they dare to move again. "We gotta find another way," Ellie said firmly. "How do you know all this?" Harrison asked. "Because if you don't learn how things work around here, you won't last long, and I plan to stay alive." For the first time in his life, Harrison felt completely dependent on someone else. Not a professional, a bodyguard, or even a doctor, but a child. A child the world had forgotten, but who now was his only chance. The midday sun bore down on their backs mercilessly. Ellie walked ahead, her backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. Harrison trailed behind, drenched in sweat, stumbling with every step. He no longer pretended to be tough. The sun, his exhausted body, and the pride he'd swallowed since meeting this girl had finally defeated him. "Over there," Ellie said, nodding toward a distant structure. "Those ruins were part of an old warehouse. There's shade, sometimes water from a well, and hardly anyone goes there." Harrison could barely make out the rusty outlines of the old metal shed. He nodded weakly. "Perfect, if I can make it that far." "Quit exaggerating," Ellie scoffed without turning around. "We've only been walking 3 hours. I've gone twice as long with a fever and an empty stomach." "Well, I'm old and broken," he grumbled. "I'm not like you." She stopped, turned, and looked at him with a mix of pity and amusement. "No, you're nothing like me. You had people, money, everything. And now look at you. You're just like me." Harrison lowered his gaze. Her words hit him like a punch. He couldn't argue. She was right. They arrived at the warehouse a few minutes later. The building was half collapsed, the roof sagging, the walls covered with graffiti and dust. Beside it, an old rusty water tank barely dripped. "I slept here a lot," Ellie said, stepping inside first. "No one comes because they think it's haunted. Ghosts don't scare me. Living people do." Harrison collapsed on the ground with a weary sigh. He peeled off his shoes, now completely ruined, and stared at his blistered feet. "Thanks for bringing me here," he said breathlessly. "I couldn't handle another night out in the desert." "Don't thank me," Ellie replied. "I just don't like seeing people die. It makes me nervous." Harrison smiled faintly, but genuinely. "Nervous or not, you saved my life. I'm grateful." She shrugged. "Maybe tomorrow you can make it to the road. If you're lucky, someone will give you a ride." "And what about you?" Harrison asked, staring at her intently. "What about me? What are you gonna do?" Ellie hesitated, then sat against the wall, hugging her knees tightly to her chest. "Same thing as always. Look for food, dodge bad people, stay alive, you know." Harrison shook his head sadly. "That's no life." "It's my life," she said bluntly. Silence filled the space between them, broken only by the wind whistling through gaps in the damaged roof. "Hey, Ellie," Harrison finally said softly. "Have you ever thought about going to school?" She laughed shortly, without any joy. "Have you ever thought about sleeping in a dumpster?" "No," he admitted quietly. "Then we're even." Harrison fell silent, thoughtful. Something about this girl moved him deeply. Her toughness, her sharp wit, her hidden intelligence. Inside her was a whole world nobody else seemed to notice. And he, with all his money and power, had spent his entire life ignoring worlds like hers. At that moment, without saying anything aloud, he made a decision. He didn't know how he'd do it yet, but he wasn't leaving her behind. Ellie deserved better, even if she didn't ask for it, didn't trust him, and tried to push him away. Sometimes you don't choose whom to save. Sometimes you just can't move forward knowing you've left someone behind. Harrison woke up abruptly. He'd slept a few uncomfortable hours against the warehouse wall, his body aching, his mind unsettled. He dreamed about Rodrigo, his son, shouting words he couldn't understand, and Ellie disappearing down a dark tunnel. He slowly sat up, looking around for the girl. She was nowhere in sight. "Ellie?" he called out quietly, still half asleep. A few seconds later, she appeared at the back of the shed, holding a plastic bag in one hand. Her cheeks were flushed from the sun. "Don't shout," she said, tossing him a squished piece of bread and a rusty can. "I went out to find something to eat. This was all I could get." Harrison clumsily caught the bread. "Where did you find it?" "There's a stall about 15 minutes from here. If you walk fast and keep your head down, you can grab the stuff they throw out at the end of the day." He stared at her silently. That girl had a better survival system than most of his managers. "Thank you," he said, with genuine sincerity this time. She shrugged and sank back down against the wall. As they ate, Harrison noticed an old payphone just outside the shed. He hesitated, then stood. "That phone, does it still work?" Ellie laughed. "If it did, do you really think I'd still be stuck here with you?" "Maybe there's still a line," he murmured and stepped outside without waiting. He opened the rusted phone booth door. The receiver dangled from a torn wire, but the keypad was still intact. He punched in the number to his office. Nothing. He tried again, this time dialing Sarah Herrera, a police officer he'd known for years. One ring, then two. Finally, someone answered. "Hello? Sarah, it's me. Harrison." "Harrison? Oh my God, where are you? Everyone thought... Your son said he hadn't heard from you. We thought maybe..." "I'm alive, more or less. I need you to listen. Don't call anyone yet. I need to get out of here quietly. And I need..." He glanced back toward the shed. "I need help with a girl. Her name is Ellie. She saved my life. She has no one. I can't leave her here." Sarah was silent for a moment. "Are you sure about this?" "More sure than I've been about anything in my life." "Okay. If you can, send me your location." "I can't, but I'll be on the main road by the old copper plant, the one they shut down years ago. You remember it?" "Perfectly. Wait for us there at sunrise." "Got it. I'm so glad you're alive, Harrison." He hung up without answering and walked back toward the shed. Ellie eyed him, squinting. What did you do? I called someone I trust. They're coming for us tomorrow. She frowned. Us? Yes, both of us. No more sleeping in sheds or digging through trash. She stared at him for a long moment, then leaned back against the wall. Don't promise stuff you're not gonna keep, she mumbled. Harrison sat beside her, her words weighing heavy in his chest. I'm not gonna let you down, Ellie. Not this time. Night fell fast over the desert. The stars lit up the sky, and the silence was so deep that every rustle and gust of wind sounded sharp and loud. Inside the shed, Ellie tried to sleep, curled up with her backpack under her head. Harrison sat near the entrance, gazing up at the sky without saying a word. I can't sleep, she whispered, without opening her eyes. Me neither, he sighed. What if they don't show up tomorrow? They will. Sarah's solid. And what if they leave me behind and take you? Harrison turned to her, serious. That won't happen. Ellie sat up suddenly. People always say that. I won't leave you behind. Things will get better. Trust me. Then they disappear. I've heard it all before. I'm not like them. She looked him straight in the eye, somewhere between angry and afraid. You're worse. You had everything, and you still let them tie you up like a dog. If it weren't for me, you'd be dead under that tree. And now what? You want to play the hero? Harrison swallowed hard. His pride took a hit, but he didn't get defensive. He just nodded. You're right. I let my guard down. I trusted the wrong people. I forgot to look out for the ones closest to me. But you're not just some kid from the street. You've got more strength in you than my entire board of directors put together, and I'm not walking away from you. Ellie lowered her gaze. The silence returned for a while. Then she quietly asked, What if they send me to one of those places? A shelter or a foster home? I've been in one before. They hit me, locked me up. That's not gonna happen. Not this time. I won't let it. What do you know? You're rich. Rich people do what they want and then disappear. That's how it's always been. Then let me prove I'm different. She didn't reply, but instead of using her backpack as a pillow again, she handed it to Harrison. Take care of it. Everything I have is in there. He held it carefully, like something delicate. And in that small, quiet gesture, something shifted between them. By the time dawn crept in, they were already awake. They'd left the shed before the sky turned orange, walking in silence along the edge of the terrain toward the road near the old copper plant. Harrison limped a little as he walked, while Ellie, as always, moved forward with quiet confidence. When the cracked asphalt of the road finally came into view, he let out a long breath of relief. That's it, he said. They sat under the sparse shade of a cactus. The sun was starting to heat up, and the air smelled of dry earth and rusted metal. 20 minutes passed. Then 40. Are you sure she's coming? Ellie asked, frowning. Yes, Harrison replied, though doubt was starting to creep in. At last, a black car appeared in the distance, kicking up a cloud of dust as it approached. It slowed down and came to a gentle stop. Sarah stepped out, sunglasses on, her face tight with worry. Harrison! She exclaimed when she saw him. He managed a small smile. You're late, he said. Sarah looked over at Ellie. And her? She's the one who saved me, Harrison said. Her name's Ellie. She's coming with me. Sarah raised an eyebrow. His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument, but she still turned to the girl. Are you coming with him because you want to? She asked, crouching slightly to meet Ellie's eyes. Ellie didn't answer right away. She looked disheveled, her hair tangled, lips chapped. Clutching her backpack tightly to her chest, she glanced down. He says he wants to help me, but they all say that. Sarah studied her with a softness in her eyes. Then she looked back at Harrison. Do you realize what you're saying? This isn't a movie, Harrison. She's a child. You can't just take her with you. I don't want to do anything illegal, he said calmly. I just don't want her to end up back on the street. Let her stay with me until we figure this out. Sarah folded her arms, thinking it over. There are procedures. Child services needs to be involved. No shelters, Ellie cut in, raising her voice. Don't put me back in one of those. A thick silence followed. Sarah sighed, staring off at the horizon. All right, you'll both come to my place tonight, she said at last. But first thing in the morning, we're doing this by the book. Harrison, you'll talk to a lawyer. And you, she said, turning to Ellie, you'll have to answer a few questions. Ellie gave a small nod. They climbed into the car. The blast of cool air from the AC hit them like a taste of another world. Harrison leaned back, eyes closed. Ellie kept her gaze locked on the window. Sarah's house was modest but cozy. Checkered tablecloth on the dining table, the scent of fresh coffee and toast in the air. Ellie walked down the hallway carefully, like she expected someone to yell or shove her at any moment. You can shower, Sarah said gently, nodding toward the bathroom. There's clean clothes waiting, my nieces. Ellie hesitated, then finally agreed. Harrison sat on the couch, staring at a framed photo on the wall. Your daughter? He asked. My sister, Sarah replied. I raised her since she was 2. She died 5 years ago, car accident. I guess I got used to the quiet after that. Harrison nodded in silence. A few minutes later, Ellie stepped out of the bathroom. Her hair was damp, and she wore a clean t-shirt and loose pants. She looked like a different kid, but her eyes still held that same guarded stare. Sarah set a plate down, beans, bread, and a glass of milk. Ellie started slow but gave in to her hunger before long. So, she suddenly asked, turning to Harrison, what are you going to do with me? He put his cup down, looked her straight in the eyes. I'm going to talk to my lawyers. We'll start the adoption process, if you want that. Ellie swallowed hard. And if it doesn't work, what if they take me away? Then we'll fight. I won't leave you, not this time. Sarah quietly observed from the kitchen. Something in that moment stirred a part of her that had been numb for years. She got up and stepped out, giving them some privacy. Ellie turned to Harrison again. I want a room, one that locks. No chains, no yelling. It'll be your room, he said. You'll decide what goes in it. She took a deep breath. For the first time, she didn't seem defensive, just tired. So tired. Okay, she said softly. Harrison smiled. It wasn't a victory, but it was a beginning, and that was more than he'd dared hope for. The next day began with tension in the air. Harrison was up early, freshly showered and dressed in clothes Sarah had lent him, waiting anxiously for a call from his lawyers. Ellie stayed in the room, not ready to come out. Sarah, holding a cup of coffee, watched him from the kitchen. Are you ready for everything that's coming? She asked bluntly. No, he admitted with a sigh. But I'm not backing out. She nodded. That's good. But good intentions don't win legal battles. This isn't just any kid. We're talking about a girl with no papers, no official records, no known relatives. That complicates everything. Then we register her, Harrison replied. I've got connections. If there's one thing I know how to do, it's work the system when it matters. Sarah shook her head gently. This isn't business, Harrison. This is a broken life. And those don't heal with money. He didn't argue. Deep down, he knew she was right. But deep down, Harrison knew something had shifted. For the first time in his life, he was willing to fight for something that wasn't tied to his business. Mid-morning, Ellie finally emerged from the bedroom, wearing the same clothes as the day before, her hair still damp. Sarah offered her breakfast, but she only picked at a piece of bread. Harrison watched her with concern. Did you sleep at all? He asked. Ellie shrugged. More than usual. Harrison gave her a soft smile. We're seeing a lawyer today, someone I trust. She's going to explain everything we need to do so you can stay with me. Ellie looked down and said nothing, but she didn't argue. The law office was in downtown Tucson. Blanca Gutierrez, a sharp-eyed older woman with a kind smile, welcomed them with quiet professionalism and just a hint of curiosity. So you must be Ellie, she said warmly. "Welcome." Ellie barely nodded, sitting stiffly at the edge of her chair with her backpack clutched to her chest. "She doesn't have a birth certificate," Harrison explained. "No documents, just her word and what she's been through." "That's going to be a challenge," Blanca said as she opened a file. "But not impossible. First, we'll need to register her with a full name and an approximate birth date. Then file an official declaration of abandonment." "I wasn't abandoned," Ellie cut in firmly. "I left." The room fell silent. Blanca looked at her seriously. "Why did you leave?" "Because they hit me. Because they screamed at me. Because no one wanted me. I chose the streets. At least there, I was free." Blanca took a slow breath and wrote something in her notes. "We'll include that in the report." Harrison's vision blurred with emotion. A mix of anger, guilt, and sadness churned inside him. It broke his heart to think a 7-year-old had to choose between violence and homelessness. "What's the next step?" he asked, finding his voice again. "We begin with temporary guardianship," Blanca explained, "while we work on getting her official documents. It's going to be a long road, Harrison. Longer and harder than you think." "I don't care," he said without hesitation. "I just want her to be safe and happy." Blanca gave him a small smile. "That part isn't up to me, or even the paperwork. It's up to the two of you." That evening, back at Sarah's house, Ellie sat at the table without being asked. She asked for seconds. She laughed at one of Sarah's jokes, and before bed she turned to Harrison and quietly said, "I don't know if this will work, but thanks for trying." He gently brushed her hair aside. "It'll work, because we're going to do it together." The following days were a blur of forms, interviews, and long silences. Harrison moved with Ellie to a smaller, quieter house he owned just outside Tucson. It wasn't his main residence, but it was private, away from curious eyes and gossiping staff. Ellie had her own room, just like she asked for, but she spent most of her time inside with the door closed. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to meet the social workers with their fake smiles and endless questions. "You doing okay?" Harrison asked one afternoon, leaning on her doorway. She was sitting on the floor, drawing with colored pencils Sarah had given her. She didn't look up. "Need help with anything?" "I don't want anyone coming into my room," she said flatly. "Okay. No one will come in unless you say so. And I don't want people talking to me like I'm some weirdo. That lady today? She talked to me like I was stupid." "I know. You're not. You're smart. Very smart." She froze for a second, then looked up. "You really think that?" "I do. And I think you're brave, too. You've survived more than most grown-ups could handle." She swallowed hard and looked away. "I just don't want to be left again," she whispered. Those words hit Harrison like a punch to the chest. He stepped inside, slowly, and sat beside her on the floor. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. "But I'll make you a promise that matters more than that. I won't force you into anything. I won't lie to you. If someday you don't want this anymore, just say so. But as long as you'll have me, I'll stay." She didn't reply right away. She drew a red circle on the page. Then, still looking down, she murmured, "I kinda believe you." Harrison smiled. That's a start. A few days later, Sarah returned, with Blanca by her side. They brought fresh paperwork and important news. "The judge approved the temporary guardianship," Blanca announced. "That means Ellie can legally live with you while we move forward with the adoption." Harrison nodded, deeply relieved. Ellie, seated at the table, looked a little confused. "So, does that mean I'm his daughter now?" Sarah leaned toward her with a gentle smile. "Not yet, but it means, for now, you get to be together, and no one can take that away." "And what else needs to happen before I'm really your daughter?" Ellie asked. "Time," Sarah said gently. "Interviews, paperwork, more signatures, and most importantly, for you to be sure this is what you want, too." Ellie turned to Harrison, her expression serious. "Do you want that?" He didn't hesitate. "More than anything right now." She looked down, thoughtful, then barely above a whisper said, "Then I want it too." Sarah exchanged a look with Blanca. It was just the beginning, but it was a promise. That night, for the very first time, Ellie left her bedroom door slightly open. Harrison noticed. He didn't say anything, just quietly laid down on the living room couch with a blanket, just in case she woke up or needed something, or maybe was ready to trust. The weeks that followed settled into a new, if wobbly, rhythm. Every morning, Harrison drove Ellie to school in his gray pickup. She barely spoke on the way, usually staring out the window, arms crossed, a little frown on her face. Her uniform was too big, and while her hair was clean now, it still had a life of its own. But even so, she walked through the school gate with her chin held high. "I don't want anyone touching me," she told the teacher her first day. "And if someone takes my backpack, I'm not coming back." It was all new for Harrison, too. His life used to be meetings, flights, and business lunches. Now it revolved around class schedules, homework, and sessions with child psychologists. There were moments he questioned himself, not his choice to care for Ellie, but whether he was actually cut out for it. One afternoon, as they returned home, something felt off. Ellie's backpack was tossed in the hallway, and her door was slammed shut. He knocked gently. "Ellie, everything okay?" "Leave me alone," she yelled from inside. Harrison slowly pushed the door open. She was sitting on the floor, red-eyed, her backpack dumped in front of her. Crumpled papers, a torn notebook, and among them, a paper with big, clumsy letters scrawled across it. "Kids like you don't belong here." Harrison felt something inside him break. "Who wrote this?" "Doesn't matter," she muttered, wiping her face with her sweater sleeve. "It's always the same. Ellie, this isn't right. They don't get to treat you like that." "Sure they do. I'm the weird one. The kid without parents. The street kid. What'd you expect? That they'd ask me to play?" He knelt down in front of her. "I expected them to treat you with respect. And if they don't, then I'm going to make sure that changes. But I can't help if you don't tell me what's going on." She shot him a sharp look. "And what if I do, huh? You gonna yell at the kids? Buy off their parents?" "No, but I'll stand up for you, the way no one else ever did." Ellie pressed her lips together. Then, quieter, she asked, "And what if I can't handle this?" Harrison looked at her, calm and steady. "Then I'll help you carry it." She wrapped her arms around him for the first time. That night, she placed her backpack on the dining table, pulled out her notebooks one by one, and started on her homework. Harrison made hot chocolate and sat across from her. They didn't say much, but they didn't need to. There was a new feeling in the air, something like peace, or maybe the beginning of it. After dinner, when Ellie went to her room, Harrison noticed something was missing from her waistband. Her knife. It wasn't there. He'd seen it on her every day, like it was a part of her. He stepped into the hallway and called softly, "Ellie?" She appeared at her door, barefoot, her face calm. "Yeah? Where's your knife?" She gave a small smile. "I put it in the drawer. Don't think I'll need it. For now." Harrison nodded. He didn't say anything, just smiled back, knowing that tiny decision meant more than any court ruling ever could. That night, both of them slept better than they had in a long time. Not because the world was suddenly safe, but because at last, they weren't facing it alone. Mornings at Harrison's house weren't quiet anymore. You could hear the water running, the clinking of plates, and sometimes, even laughter. Ellie had picked up the habit of making her own breakfast. Toast with butter, warm milk, maybe some fruit. She said doing it herself made her feel like things were really hers. That morning, as she sat at the kitchen counter, Harrison joined her, a folder in hand. "We have an appointment with Blanca today," he said. Ellie didn't look up. "What for?" "It's to take the next step in your adoption. We need to sign some more papers, and you have to be there too." She shrugged and kept eating. "Will it even change anything?" Harrison looked at her gently. "Yes, it changes a lot. It makes it official. You and me, we're a family." She stayed quiet, chewing slowly, like she was thinking through more than just the food. Finally, she asked, "And after that, they can't take me away?" "No, not unless something really serious happens. No one can make decisions about you without me knowing." Ellie didn't say anything, but the tension in her shoulders eased, just a little. "What if you change your mind?" Ellie asked quietly. Harrison paused, set the folder down on the table, and crossed his arms. "I'm not going to change my mind, Ellie. Not after everything we've been through. Not after getting to know you." She looked at him, still a little guarded, but the edge in her eyes had softened. Something inside her was starting to trust. Blanca's office felt different that afternoon. A bouquet of flowers sat on her desk beside a box of juice boxes. When she greeted them, her smile was warmer than usual. "Today's an important day," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "This is the official adoption request. We've got everything ready. Social reports, psychological evaluations, all of it. We just need your signature, Harrison. And yours too, Ellie." Ellie's eyes widened. "Me too?" "Of course," Blanca replied kindly. "This can't happen without you. You're the one who decides if you want Harrison to be your legal dad. Only if you say yes." Ellie stared at the document. She didn't understand much of the legal language, but she recognized her name printed in big letters beside Harrison's. "Can I read it first?" "Of course," Blanca said, flipping the pages carefully. "I can explain anything you want." For several minutes, Ellie listened, asked questions, and hesitated. Harrison didn't say a word. He just watched her with quiet pride. Finally, she picked up the pen and signed. "There," she said with a long breath. "I guess I'm kind of adopted now, right?" Blanca smiled. "More than kind of. You're now part of something a lot of people only dream about. A family that chooses you." Back at home, Ellie didn't say much, but as soon as they arrived, she ran to her room, opened the drawer where she used to keep her knife, and placed a copy of the signed document inside. Then she went to Harrison's room. "Can I hang something on your wall?" "Of course," he said, surprised. "Anything you want." She pulled out a folded white sheet. It was a drawing, 2 stick figures, one big and one small, holding hands in front of a house. At the top, in crooked letters, it read, "My place." Harrison took the drawing gently and taped it beside the door. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Some things speak louder than anything we could ever say. School was still the hardest part for Ellie. The notes in her notebook were gone, and no one shoved her in the halls anymore. But she still felt like she didn't quite fit in. There were good days when she answered in class, shared her lunch with a classmate, or laughed at a joke. And there were days she came home quiet, fists clenched deep in her pockets. That afternoon, Harrison waited in the car like always. Ellie climbed in without saying a word and stared out the window. "You okay?" he asked gently. "Yeah. Are you sure?" She didn't answer. Harrison didn't push. He knew with her, words came when they were ready. When they got home, she went straight to her room. She shut the door, not loud, but with intention. Harrison stayed in the living room, unsure whether to go to her or give her space. An hour later, the door creaked open. Ellie walked into the dining room and sat across from him, her eyes a little swollen. "They called me a dirty adopted kid." Harrison's throat tightened. "Who said that?" "Doesn't matter. I handled it." "What did you do?" "I told them I hoped one day someone would love them the way you love me." Harrison couldn't hide the smile that tugged at his face, even as his eyes welled up. Ellie looked down, uneasy. "I don't like crying." "Sometimes you have to," he said gently. "I already cried enough when I lived on the street. I cried alone, and no one ever heard me." "Well, now if you cry, I'll hear you." She pressed her lips together and stood to leave, but Harrison placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Do you know what I admire most about you?" "What?" "That you didn't let the pain turn you into someone bitter. A lot of people go cold with half of what you've been through. But you're still kind. Tough, yes, but kind. Ellie didn't move. She didn't look at him, but she didn't walk away either. Do you think one day people will stop seeing me as just the adopted kid? Maybe, he said. But you know what? That's not what really matters, because you're so much more than that, and the people who matter will see it. She gave a small nod. Then, without a word, she hugged him, tight. Harrison wrapped his arms around her and closed his eyes. That night, after dinner, Ellie asked if they could watch a movie together. They curled up on the couch under a blanket, sharing a bowl of popcorn. And for the first time, she let herself fall asleep with her head resting on his shoulder. Harrison didn't move. He didn't want to wake her. As the flickering light from the TV lit up the room, he realized the most important part of this journey wasn't legal or psychological or academic. It was emotional. And that, this bond, imperfect but real, was already built. The day of the final court hearing came without warning. Blanca called that morning, her voice full of excitement. "Today's the day. The judge is going to sign the order. If everything goes as planned, Ellie will officially be your daughter." Harrison hung up, his heart pounding faster than usual. He walked to Ellie's room and found her sitting on the bed, slowly tying her shoelaces. She was wearing the outfit she'd picked herself: jeans, a white t-shirt with a cartoon dog, and a yellow jacket a bit too big for her small frame. "You ready?" he asked from the doorway. "It's today?" she asked softly, more to herself than to him. She paused, thoughtful. "What if I change my mind?" Harrison walked in and knelt in front of her so they were eye level. "If you tell me you don't want this, we won't do it. You don't need a piece of paper for me to love you. I won't force you." Ellie looked up, her eyes shiny. "It's not that. It's just, I've never had a last name I actually liked." Harrison smiled. "Then how about we try a new one?" She gave him a look, the same skeptical glance that had slowly started to fade over time. "And what would this name be?" "Ellie Ford," he said. "If you want it." She whispered the name, testing it out like a secret. "Sounds strange, but nice." The courthouse was cold and quiet. The judge, an older man with a serious expression, read the documents in a low voice as Blanca arranged the folders on the table. Sarah was there too, sitting nearby. She had been there from the start. Her presence now felt symbolic. Harrison wore a suit but no tie. Ellie sat beside him, fidgeting, clutching a folded piece of paper in her jacket pocket. She didn't say much, but her eyes scanned the room constantly. "Ellie," the judge said in a deep voice, "do you understand what this hearing is about?" "Yes, sir." "And do you agree to have Harrison Ford as your adoptive father?" "Yes," she replied without much hesitation. "Is there anything you'd like to add?" Ellie reached into her pocket, unfolded the paper carefully, and placed it on the table. It was a drawing, her and Harrison holding hands, with a house and a tree. It looked just like the one she had taped to her bedroom wall, but this one had something different written above the house: "My family." She added softly, "I don't write very well, but this is what I want." The judge looked at her for a few moments, then smiled gently and picked up his pen. "Let it be recorded. From today forward, Ellie will carry the last name Ford. And Harrison, you are now her legal father." Harrison closed his eyes briefly. Ellie looked at him, waiting for something. He took her hand firmly. "Thank you for choosing me, daughter." She swallowed hard, then replied in a soft voice, "Thank you for staying." That night, once they were home, Ellie ran to her room and took the knife out of the drawer. She held it for a moment, then went outside to the backyard. There, next to the tree Harrison had planted weeks ago, she dug a small hole and buried it. "Won't be needing this anymore," she murmured. Harrison watched from the doorway. He didn't say anything, just smiled. In that quiet moment, they both knew there was no turning back. The name might be new, but the bond had long since been real. 1 year later, the sun still beat down on Tucson, but in the Ford home, it didn't feel as heavy. Ellie had just turned 8. She ran across the yard, laughing, chasing a floppy-eared mutt they'd adopted months earlier. She named him Valiente, brave, because in her words, being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about going on even when you're shaking inside. Harrison watched her from the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, peace written across his face like someone who'd finally found where he belonged. "Dad!" Ellie called from the far side of the yard. "Valiente stole my sock again!" "He just wants to play." Harrison laughed. She ran up to him, cheeks flushed from the sun and hair wild in the wind. "Also, I got picked to read my story to the whole class. My teacher said I see things differently from most kids, and I'm good at writing." "I'm not surprised," Harrison said, beaming. "You've always had a special way of looking at the world." Ellie pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "I wrote something. Want me to read it?" "Of course." She unfolded the page and read out loud with a clear, steady voice. "I used to have no home, just walls without hugs and streets without names. But now I have a room, a dad, a crazy dog, and even a tree where I buried my fear. And even if the world makes me angry sometimes, now if I fall, someone will catch me." Harrison felt a lump rise in his throat. He couldn't speak. He just looked at her, his heart too full for words. "Did you like it?" she asked. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." She folded the paper again and handed it to him. "Keep it. It's just for you." He slipped it into his shirt pocket with care. "I'll keep it forever." That night, before bed, Ellie slipped outside in silence. She sat down in front of the young tree Harrison had planted the day she moved in. And for a long moment, she just sat there, quiet, still, peaceful. She didn't need to say anything. The roots were already growing. She held a small box in her hands. Inside were 3 things: a photo Sarah had given her from her first court hearing with Harrison, a drawing with the name Ellie Ford written in crooked letters, and a plastic ring Harrison had given her during their first outing together. She knelt under the tree and gently dug a hole, placing the box inside. "This is so I never forget where I came from," she whispered, as if speaking directly to the earth. "But also so I can leave it all here and keep growing." When she came back inside, Harrison was already waiting at the door, a blanket in his arms. "Ready for bed?" "Yeah," she said. "Tonight, I fell asleep even before closing my eyes." "Oh yeah? How's that?" "Because I know I'm home." Harrison turned off the hallway light and closed her bedroom door quietly behind him. And for the first time in a long time, the night was just that, a peaceful night. No fear, no heavy silences, just a family, real, imperfect, and finally whole. This story is a quiet masterpiece of emotional transformation, tender, raw, and deeply human. Ellie's journey, from a guarded, street-hardened little girl to a child who dares to believe in love and belonging, is nothing short of extraordinary. What makes her character so powerful is not just her resilience, but the way she slowly, stubbornly, and beautifully allows herself to trust again. Her growth isn't rushed or wrapped in fantasy. It's messy, cautious, and heartbreakingly real. Harrison's transformation is just as moving. A man once defined by business meetings and cold routines, he finds something richer, a purpose beyond success. He learns that parenting isn't about perfection, but presence. His willingness to listen, to show up, and to let go of control becomes the bridge that helps Ellie walk from survival into safety. One of the most powerful moments is when Ellie buries her plastic ring, a childhood treasure, under the tree Harrison planted. That simple act reflects a deep truth. Healing doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means honoring it, then choosing to grow beyond it. The story leaves us with a lasting lesson. Family isn't built on blood, but on the everyday courage to love someone through their pain. It reminds us that the people who choose to stay, especially when it's hard, are the ones who change lives. And it speaks to anyone who's ever felt alone, that no matter how broken your beginning may be, there's always a path toward hope, if someone believes in you. In a world often too fast to label or discard, this story gently insists that every life is worth fighting for. It shows that with patience, kindness, and a little bit of bravery, even the most wounded hearts can find their way home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it. Leave a comment to tell us how it inspired you, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and be with you every step of the way.